Welcome to Charm and Circumstance. I'm your host, Ashley Morgan from Ashley Morgan Interiors. There are certain elements of your home that you notice immediately, and there are some that you actually literally feel. Textiles fall into that category. They soften a space, they absorb sound, more important than we realize. They add warmth, depth, and comfort. And more than anything else, they shape how a home lives. But textiles aren't just about color or pattern, they're about performance, durability, function. And understanding them just a little bit more completely changes how you design a space. So today we're talking about textiles, how they work, how they're tested, and how to choose the right ones for how you actually live. From floor plans to finishing touches, function to the feeling you get walking into a room, I'm Ashley Morgan, an interior designer with a love for beautiful living and a belief that great design should tell your story. I've spent over 20 years in the industry, and now I'm pulling back the curtain on interiors, sharing insight, inspiration, and the strategy behind well-designed spaces. Expect smart design talk, refined tips, and just the right mix of polish and personality. So pour something sweet and join me for a thoughtful conversation with a generous helping of charm and circumstance. When we first think about textiles, we often think visually. Fabric, color, pattern, but their role is much deeper than that. They soften hard lines. They absorb sound and reduce echo. They add layers of texture and depth, and they create comfort, both physically and visually. A room without textiles can feel cold, unfinished, and even slightly uninviting. And the more layered a space becomes, through rugs or upholstery, drapery, bedding, the more complete it can feel. Textiles are what makes a house feel like a place that you can settle into. There are two main types of fibers: natural fibers and synthetic fibers. Natural fibers are going to be the cotton, linen, wool, and silk. These tend to feel more breathable and organic. Cotton is going to be really soft, very versatile, widely used. Linen is very textured. It's relaxed. It's slightly more prone to wrinkling, as I'm sure we all already know. Wool is very durable. It's resilient. It's naturally stain resistant. And then silk is very delicate. It's refined. It's more decorative. Synthetic fibers, on the other hand, are your polyester, acrylic, rayon, nylon, olefin. These are engineered for performance. These are man-made fibers. They are more resistant to stains and fadings because they're created to be that way. Generally speaking, they're often more durable. They are easier to maintain. And most textiles today are actually blends of both natural and synthetic. So it combines the beauty of the natural fibers with the durability of synthetics. So what does durability actually mean? And it's so funny, when I made the transition from commercial design to residential design. In commercial design, things are referred to by their test ratings, or the really black and white standard that exists for textiles, how they're dyed, what they're made of, what type of exact nylon they are. But in residential, that is not the case. Everything has trade names, which to the unknowing person, and of course, that means nothing. It carries no weight whatsoever. And so you would have to dig and dig and dig to find out what that trade name actually even means. So they may put some trademark on a fabric that is our durability line. but that means nothing to you, really, right? So, whereas in commercial, they would likely give you what it meant, how the test results of an actual durability test, and you would know what that means. So this has been a learning curve for me as well, as I became familiar with how things are phrased in residential design regarding textiles, and how to get to the bottom of what they actually mean. Durability is the most important thing in textiles, and it's the most misunderstood part of textiles. It's not just about how something feels, it's about how it holds up over time. And this is where the testing comes in. So, the first test that we'll talk about is called the Weisenbeck test. And this is otherwise known as the double rub test. This is the standard test that's used to measure fabric durability. It simulates wear by rubbing fabric back and forth until it shows signs of breakdown. So here's how to think about the numbers. This is the most quoted, I think, and published test regarding textiles. And it's something that you can easily ask as well. So under 15,000 double rubs, they put these, of course, in machines to do these tests. And it just rubs and wears that fabric, those fibers back and forth, just like you would be using the fabric, right? If it was on upholstery, which is where you're definitely going to see this test used on upholstery fabrics, where you're sitting on a sofa and you're moving up, back and forth and getting up and down and, all of that. That's where this is important. So under 15,000 double rubs, that's a light use. So this is decorative pieces, pillows that aren't going to be like sat on and used. Or it could be drapery, or maybe even like a sofa that is in a room where nobody actually goes into and it's just there for looks. Then 15,000 to 30,000 double rubs is a medium use. So this is dining room chairs or occasional seating. This isn't you're sitting in there every single day and running over that fabric back and forth constantly. And then 50,000 double rubs, meeting that standard, is commercial grade durability. Obviously, commercial grade is always going to be a higher standard than a residential because it's so much more foot traffic. It's so much more use and abuse. So if you have kids or pets or just a high traffic home, this matter is really, really important. Durability is just one piece. Textiles go through multiple tests depending on their use. So one other test is pilling resistance. We're familiar with this because we see our clothing pill, right? Like you will see it a lot of times like on the trunk of clothing and the arms as they rub next to each other. This is the same thing that you'll see on like upholstery fabric, for example, where it's being rubbed and it starts to pill, right? Like the fibers from that fabric start to come loose and you'll see the little pills or like little like dots that are coming loose and sitting on top on the face of that fabric. So this is the pilling resistance is going to tell you how likely the fabric is to form those little fuzz balls over time. Seam strength, of course, very important in fabrics that are really being like pulled on and abused. And so this is going to be, of course, how well the fabric is going to hold together under pressure. Abrasion resistance. This is how well it's going to withstand that friction. You see a lot of this in commercial applications. Flammability ratings. This is obviously very, very important, but something that the general consumer doesn't really pay attention to because these are very standardized and code enforced rules, laws, codes, whatever you want to call it. But the irony is, I don't know how much This is really enforced because we import so much. For example, children's pajamas. Do you remember, like, in the 80s, we would wear those, like, nylon, I mean, terrible synthetic fiber nightgowns that would have, like, the cartoon characters or Disney characters or whatever on the front, and you would go to bed, and I would always call it, a lightning storm because there would be so much static going into the sheets wearing those terrible pajamas. Those are so flammable. It's insane. And so they did pass regulations requiring that pajamas meet a higher level of flame resistance testing. And so, but I wonder how much of this is really truly enforced, especially on really cheap imports. That's beside the point. But so there are standards regarding pajamas because, of course, that's the most vulnerable residential setting for a fire to start. Then you've got, of course, with commercial settings, very different flammability standards, and this also applies to whether the surface, whatever you're testing, is a vertical setting, so like a wall covering, because flame spread goes up. And so if you're giving it something to climb up the wall, it's that much more dangerous. And then, of course, like the vertical, like carpets and surfaces like that. So this is really, really important in any commercial or hospitality setting. These tests ensure that the fabric isn't just going to look good, but that it's actually going to perform and be safe, and not add to a fire in that kind of terrible situation. And then we'll talk about lightfastness. So this is very important because have you ever spent money on some upholstered piece of fabric or window treatment, and then the sun just fades it out and it looks terrible and totally degrades over time? That's so frustrating. But this is a real situation, and this is often what prevents me from specifying certain fabrics for window treatments specifically, and paying attention to how a home is situated. Like, where is the south facing sun coming in on that home? That makes a huge difference on which window treatments can be selected. Light fastness is one of the most overlooked factors when it comes to textile qualities. It measures how the fabric resists fading when exposed to light, specifically sunlight. A fabric can look beautiful when installed, aka 100% linen draperies. But without good light fastness, it can fade unevenly over time. So this is obviously, again, particularly important for window treatments. Upholstery near windows, like the back of that chair that's sitting up against the window and is going to fade out. Outdoor fabrics, obviously, it's important there. And if a room gets strong natural light, becomes a key factor in making those decisions. Ways to deal with light fastness. For example, 100% natural fibers are going to have less light fastness than the synthetic fibers because the synthetic fibers are created to resist that. Whereas like the 100% linen drapes, if you have harsh sun coming in on those, they are going to start to degrade and almost loosen and then droop even more. And you've measured window treatments to be exactly this perfect length to hit the floor. And now that's changing. And it's going to be uneven as well, right? Because the sun maybe hits a certain part of that window just right based on trees outside and all of the things and the angle of the house. So it's just something that like can really make a difference. And when you're investing into these types of materials and features for your home, you really need them to hold up. Okay, so then let's talk about how specific fabrics are made for specific applications. Not all fabrics are meant for all uses. Choosing the right textile depends on where it's going, like upholstery fabric. This needs to be highly durable and abrasion resistant. Looking for higher double rub counts and performance fabrics is key here. Not to say that a linen fabric can't be used, and I've used linen on upholstery before. There are instances where that can be used, but it also, again, depends on, is it going to be sitting right in the sun? Is it going to be backed with something else to be upholstered? This happens often as well. And these are things that an interior designer works with their upholsterer and their textile vendors to make sure that everything is going to function at absolute peak performance. Window treatments are typically going to be the lighter fabric, but they need strong lightfastness. So consider how the fabric filters light as well. This also comes into play with the backing fabric on window treatments, or like blackout curtains, for example. That's a great example of how you can chain. It doesn't matter what the face fabric is in that instance, because you're going to be blocking out the light completely from touching that fabric. Of course, you still always have the very inside of those panels that's touching the light that can fade over time. I've had this happen in my own house, and there's just nothing you can really do about that in some instances. So in bedding, these are specific fabrics as well. You want really soft fabrics, of course, and breathable fabrics. Natural fibers are great in this instance, like cotton and linen, and then pillows and decorative accents. There, you've got a lot of flexibility here, because these are not designed to be highly abused or need to pass certain testing like these other uses do. So this is where you can bring in a lot of texture and pattern and personality, because your constraints are so few. Function should always guide selection. So then we can talk about outdoor textiles. Outdoor fabrics are a category of their own. They are engineered to handle UV exposure, moisture, temperature changes, and common materials include solution-dyed acrylics and performance synthetics. And what that means is, and solution dyed, by the way, is a term you will never see out in the residential world. It is a commercially used term. But you have solution dyed means that if you cut that fiber in half, and you were looking like at a section of it under a microscope, obviously, and it was dyed, the color is going to be all the way through it, just like a carrot. If you were slicing a carrot, it's going to be orange in the center. That's solution dyed fiber. Any other fiber, like a piece dyed fiber, is like a red onion. You slice it, it was red on the outside, it's white on the inside. So keep that in mind. Of course, it's a stronger color fastness if you've got the color all the way through into that core, because if it's just dyed on the outside of the fiber, if that gets worn away, faded away, any sort of thing, you're now exposing the core, which is, you've seen that, I'm sure, on different fibers, outdoor fabrics that maybe have faded through, they're getting white, right? And that's why. So these outdoor fabrics are going to be, hopefully, fade resistant, mold and mildew resistant, easy to clean, and increasingly they're being used indoor as well, especially in high traffic homes. And I will say as well, none of these are ever proof. You don't see mold proof or fade proof, because that would mean with 100% certainty, they are not going to have these issues. They are only resistant, meaning they've helped the situation, but it is not a 100% guarantee. Another thing too to keep in mind, especially with the outdoor fabrics and like high performance fibers where they are engineered to be very, very high performing and hold up under all sorts of elements of abuse, whether that be UV or abrasion or anything like that. A lot of times these are coated with chemicals. And, that's a whole other rabbit hole that we could go down. And of course, this information isn't always completely forthright, but I do sometimes have some hesitance in going full throttle down the road of getting these high performance coated fabrics, because there's no way that these coatings are as healthy for us as just completely natural fabrics. Of course, you cannot use completely natural fabrics outside and they be like hold up for a week, right? So it's something good to know and to be aware of, at least as you are making these selections. So once the performance is established, this is where the design comes in. And of course, texture creates depth, and texture in the fabrics, that's where we really get to bring in a lot of the different textures and the variety. And that is such a massive part of interior design. So even in a neutral palette, layering textures can make a space feel very rich and complete. So you could literally have an all-white room and nothing but white in it, nothing but white fabrics and finishes, and still through texture achieve something with real depth to it. So combining that smooth and woven together, or matte with a subtle sheen, or soft and structured pieces. Pattern adds movement and definitely visual interest. But balance is always key. Not every piece needs to stand out. This is a huge mistake that I see people making often, is you want every single thing to stand out, but that just overwhelms and it just leads to things looking cluttered. So some pieces need to support, some pieces need to anchor, some can add contrast. A beautiful fabric only works if it's supporting your actual lifestyle. So some important questions to ask would be, can it be cleaned easily? Does it hide wear? Will it age well? Some textiles patina beautifully over time. Others are going to show wear really quickly. Choosing the right fabric isn't about how it looks today. That's the best it's ever going to look. It's about how it's going to look a year from now, and hopefully longer. Textiles are one of the most powerful tools in design. They influence comfort, acoustics, light, mood, and when chosen well, they quietly support how you live. They don't demand attention, but they shape everything. Textiles are often seen as the finishing layer, but in many ways, they're the foundation. They determine how a space feels, how it functions, how it holds up over time. So the next time that you choose a fabric, whether it's a sofa, drapery, or pillows, look beyond how it looks. Consider how it's going to live, because the best design choices are the ones that support your life beautifully and consistently. Thanks for joining me on Charm and Circumstance. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along on Instagram, because charm is personal and circumstance is what you make of it.